Thanks, Brock. As you sit down, if you'll grab your worship flyer, uh, as you can tell already, things are a little different this morning. If you're a guest, thanks for being here. We hope to not run you off, or at least we hope that you enjoy your time here. So we've been in this series called This Is Us, and I said this whole thing is going to be about the key relationships in our lives, right? We didn't. I don't know if we've hit everything. I don't know if at times we've hit what you wanted us to hit, but we have tried to hit these key relationships that we all struggle with, right? The world is messy. It's hard. All of these things, this is just real life, right? And so we've been talking about this for a few weeks, and I've been telling you this day was coming where my wife would join me on stage, and we want to talk about marriage this morning. We're going to talk about some healthy principles for a healthy marriage. And by the way, if thank my wife for being up here already. Go ahead and thank her. There you go. That means clap. I challenge anybody to take your wife tomorrow and give her a microphone and see how you feel. She said, I'm nervous. I said, no, I'm the one that's nervous. Like, stick to the script this morning, honey. Before we jump in, though, I want to give you just a couple of disclaimers, okay? I want to say a couple things right up front. One is simply this, that no marriage is perfect. I have been where you are over the years, and somebody sits on a stage like this, and they start talking, and it just sounds like they know everything, right? Like they've got it figured out. Their marriage is really good. Like, why can't our marriage be like that? Please, you have your marriage. If you're married this morning, we have ours, and everybody has their limitations. Everybody has their areas of weakness, their areas of strength. So please, please, please don't sit there and think, oh gosh, wouldn't it be great if we were just like them? Our marriage was just like them. We've been doing this for almost 30 years. It is not perfect. We have a lot to learn. We have learned some things, and we have struggled over the years, okay? And that's the thing that I just want to make sure you understand that. Don't leave here this morning. Don't sit there and think, oh my gosh, these guys, they've got it all together. That's why they're up front. We simply are up here to talk about what we have learned, okay? So that's number one. Number two, failure is not final. We understand you are sitting out there this morning, and there have been multiple failures in this room, right? Some of you, you've had multiple marriages fail. We understand that. We've walked with people long enough. We've had our own struggles. We understand the pain of catastrophic failure in marriages. In fact, next week, please come back, drag your neighbors. We're going to talk about what happens when catastrophic failure hits. What do you do? And we're going to have a very compelling testimony and story about all of that. But we just need you to understand, look, the human condition has fallen. We get it, okay? So don't think that you need to feel like a failure this morning if your marriage has not. So that has to be, look, nobody's perfect. Can I say this well? Divorce is not the unpardonable sin. Sex outside of marriage is not the unpardonable sin. Right? This brutal struggle that we see coming out in our culture with people with gender identity issues wrestling deeply in their soul about what's going on, that's not the unpardonable sin. So we've got to move beyond that. We've got to have better, healthier conversations. So please, I hope you feel comfortable this morning. We want Journey to be a safe place. We want it to be a place where you are welcome and feel welcome, and then you can bring other people who need to hear about Jesus. That's what we want, okay? Last thing, singles in the room. I want you to understand singleness requires relational energy as well. So we're going to talk about marriage today, but don't check out on us because these principles, some of them do apply in different ways to the single life. So please don't check out. Just because you're single doesn't mean you can go through life without having relationships with people. So these things do apply, okay? So stay with us. All right, I'm going to start, and then I'm going to invite you. Do you want to add anything else to that? Okay. Always ask. See, here it goes. All right. Turn your mic on. There you go.
So when Cecil and I first sat down this week to talk about what we were going to say this morning, the first thing I said was, I don't have anything to say. It's very, very humbling to be sitting here this morning because, like he said, we do not have it all figured out. We do not have a perfect marriage, and we've never claimed to and never will claim to. So just know that. It is very humbling to be here, and we're just sharing with you some of the things we've learned in the last almost 30 years.
I will cry BS on that, though. She does have something to say. Last week, we sat down last week to start this conversation. We sat down, we actually had 7 principles, and then it went to 10. And then a couple days ago, we had to go, okay, well, what are the 4 things we can say? And we hope we can say it in the time. So we've got things, she's got things to say. You're going to love this. First principle this morning, first key principle that we want you to focus on. And I'm going to define this because this is huge. This is why this conversation this morning is so different than, is my mic going out on us? It's cutting in and out. All right, we're going to have to work with that. This conversation this morning is something that this is the reason it's different inside this room. Okay, that we are going to have a Bible-based conversation, and I need to say that so that we can define the parameters. Because the first principle we said this morning was simply this: make God a priority for each other. Make God a priority for each other. I realize that some of you are still struggling. What do I believe about Christ? What do I believe about God, religion? How does all this thing fit together, right? We don't want to push that conversation or make you say or believe something that you don't, but understand that as we talk to you this morning, this principle we believe needs to be at the top of your list. And here's why. Because the gospel changes everything. This is what makes marriage for a Christian different than people who are not Christians, followers of Jesus Christ. If you have not put your faith and trust in Christ yet, you have not come to believe that he is who he said he is, that he promised everything that he said he promised, and that he'll deliver on it. If that's not you, it's okay. But when you come to that point, it changes everything. And so much to the point that some of what we're going to say, it sounds a little offensive at times. Because once your perspective changes, once the gospel changes you, then you're left with having to live that change out. Watch this in Colossians 1. We're not going to read a lot of verses this morning, but I want to take you to a couple of them. Verse 15, it says, "He is the image of the invisible God," talking about Jesus, "the firstborn of all creation. For," watch this, "by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him." That means if you have put your faith and trust in Christ, you now have a different lens that you look at the world through. That you have a purpose because he designed you with a purpose. That you have a part of this world in a way that he has asked you to be a part of this world, right? What does it look like? My life can never fully be satisfied other than with a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what I believe. If that's what you believe, then it has to impact how you look at your marriage, right? Because all of a sudden now it's not just what I want, my needs, having my needs met, which is how most of us do married life, right? I get married because I want my needs met. And that is not how you can look at life anymore. It's no longer about my personal happiness. It is about my personal holiness. When I walk with Christ, marriage changes completely. So a Christ-centered marriage is different. Man, there's tons of resources out there. You can go look at all kinds of stuff to make a marriage better. And you don't have to be a Christian to have a good marriage. But if you're a Christian, everything should have changed because now everything goes through the filter of who Jesus Christ really is. Make God a priority for each other. That's just a primary truth. Let me toss it to my wife because I think she has something to add to that.
So as we talked through this point, I kind of thought, well, what does that look like practically? And so for us, we talked about just spending time in the Word and praying. I mean, it's very simple, but that is something that we try to make a priority. Some days we do better at that than others. And it's not about just, okay, I spent time praying and reading my Bible and that's it, and checking it off your list. It's about a heart change. For us to be the best spouse we can be, it's about becoming what God wants us to be. And so just for us, spending that time in the Word every day and praying and seeking God and just laying our hearts before Him and saying, okay, I know there's darkness in here. Where is it? What is it that's not pleasing to you? And asking God to change our hearts. Again, that's humbling ourselves and acknowledging our sin and acknowledging that we can't change on our own, that it's through God and His power that we can make a difference and we can change. Let's see. The other thing is, we can't depend on our spouse to do this for us. We can't depend on our pastor or our friends or our kids or our neighbors. This is something we have to choose to do for ourselves. Our walk with God it's a personal thing. It's a personal choice that we each have, and we have to make every day on our own. And I've always said, nobody's going to make you sit down and read your Bible and pray every day. It's something that you have to choose, that each one of us we have to choose that for ourselves. And it's very important that we do that. So that's the first point, is to do that personally. And then secondly, to do that as a couple. For us, it's when we're reading scripture and we're seeing something, sharing that with one another. Hey, I read this today, or mostly for me, it's like, I read this, I have no idea what this means, and going to him and saying, what does this passage mean? Or, hey, this is what I learned today, or this was really cool. I've read this passage before, but I've never seen it this way. And then two, praying together. Ladies, for us, I think it's so important that when we're struggling or we're hurting, for us to go to our spouse and say, hey, I really need you to pray for me. And we'll get into this a little bit more later, but our spouses are not mind readers. They don't know what's going on in our lives. And so for us to go to our husbands and say, hey, I really need prayer today. And for men, my encouragement and my challenge to you is to initiate prayer with your wife. I'm guessing if we surveyed the room and asked wives, would you like for your husband to initiate prayer with you? I'm guessing probably almost every woman in the room would raise their hand. So I just want to issue that challenge to you guys. I know some of you probably are already doing that, and so that's awesome. I encourage you to do that. And then the third point is just community. When Cecil and I moved to Dallas 27 years ago, we left San Antonio to move to Dallas for him to go to seminary. And at that time, we had no family here. Everybody was still in San Antonio. We were leaving them. And I was pregnant with Kristen. We were moving up here. I was teaching full time. And we knew nobody. And so we knew that we had to quickly find some friends and make friends and get involved in a community. And we were fortunately able to do that. We got involved in a church. We were living in North Richland Hills, driving to Dallas about 40 miles every week. We were volunteering in a youth group over at a church with some friends that Cecil had met in seminary. And we quickly got involved with them, built relationships. And as I look back, as we reflected back on that this week, that was so important for us to do. I can't imagine living here in the Metroplex by ourselves, expecting our first child, and not having that community. That support system was so important for us. As I close, I have a question on this point. So my question for you is, how can you make God a priority in your life personally and in your marriage?
Yeah, that's good. You'll notice that she's very, very structured, right? That's the detail side of the marriage for us, and she handles a lot of the structures. So pay attention to those little bullets that she laid out there, because she has really thought this through. I will say, husbands, and again, we aren't the best at this. I know she craves for more spiritual direction from me. I don't know what it is, men. This is one of those wrestlings that we hear about all the time. Most marriages, the wife would welcome more spiritual direction from the husband, and for some reason, we back away. We give that up a lot. So don't do that, okay? Pursue that. Even if you keep failing at it, just keep going after it, or after and after it. Next, I want to move you to the next principle so that we can get through these. But James 1, verse 19 is a verse that I've always loved. It's a verse that we probably should have found a way to tweet to the whole country this past week. It says this: "Know this, my beloved brothers, let everyone be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger." When you think like that, you say, "Well, see, that's not a verse talking about marriage." No, but think about the turmoil as a country that we're seeing, the division and fighting. Listen, if you can't do this, which is simply make it a priority to communicate with each other, if you can't do that in your marriage, then your marriage is doomed for some really rocky roads. We will tell premarital couples all the time, this is one of the first points I drive home, if we do nothing else but convince you that if you can learn to communicate better as a couple, your marriage will be more successful. I mean, it's just hands down a priority we fully believe in. I wanted to read this one quote, and I don't know that it's in your flyer, but from Gary Chapman. He's a writer who has written a book called The 5 Love Languages, and some of you may have heard of it. He said this: if we're to develop an intimate relationship, we need to know each other's desires. If we wish to love one another, we need to know what the other person wants. That's really simple and really profound. We've got to pay attention to the other person, so we have to learn how to communicate. Why don't you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, like I said, our spouses are not mind readers. That goes both ways. I think when we first got married, I thought, well, of course, he knows everything I'm thinking. I mean, shouldn't he? And I quickly realized that was so unfair for me to think that. And so that forced me to work on my communication skills, which I am still not great at. I continue to work on that. But, this can be big things and small things that we need to communicate. I think about, I hear women talk about, can he not see the laundry basket full of clothes that needs to be folded that he almost tripped over, So as women, if we need help, ask for it, say, hey, honey, would you mind folding that basket of laundry for me? It would really help me. And you know what? I have found that most husbands are very happy to help, but we've got to ask. And sometimes I think we forget that. So it's very simple, or we need help with the kids, whatever it is. And then for men, I would say as women, we need more details. Give us more details. Tell us what you're feeling. We, as women, we like that. We want to know that. We want to hear that from you. Another thing is, so when your husband asks you, ladies, where do you want to go for dinner? I don't care is not an acceptable answer. How many of you are guilty of that? I know I am. Okay, I see a few hands. I know I am so guilty of that. And so, I know that sounds super simple and maybe not important, but it's a good exercise for us in learning how to communicate our expectations, what we want, what we desire. So next time your husband asks you that, give him your top 3 restaurants and then let him pick. I think it's only fair for us to communicate. If our husband is asking us a question, then let's answer it. Let's work on communicating and answering it well. And so for those of you who got to come to the SOI marriage workshop we did a few weeks ago, James Roberts, Josh's dad, did the presentation for us. And I loved a quote he said in the very beginning. He said, the best time to talk about a problem is when it's not. And that has really sunk in with me. I think so many times when we have issues in our marriage and we need to communicate, we don't do it well, and a lot of times our timing is not right. To discuss and work through an issue in the heat of the moment doesn't always work the most effectively. And so when we do have issues, when we do have things we need to talk about, let's pick a time where we're calm and relaxed, and which also, know your spouse. Know when is a good time to communicate with your spouse. If you're not a morning person like me, I'm not a morning person, discussing issues in the morning is probably not the best time to do that. So find a time that works best for both of you to be able to discuss the issues and talk about the problem when it's not. So my question on this one is, how can you better communicate with your spouse? It can be simple. It can be something big. But think about that. How can you better communicate?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of her little quote with that SOI. It's the sphere of influence and inventory. Look, there's a ton of tools out there today. There's so many ways you can develop a strategy for some of these things. The SOI is one. We've used one called the DISC Prism. I know the DISC is an inventory that floats around in a lot of businesses because it's been adapted so many times. There's a book out right now called The Road Back to You. It's about kind of an ancient system of figuring out personalities. It's called the Enneagram, and there's been a little bit of controversy around this thing, but if you use these things simply as tools, right? This is not about a system of beliefs. This is a tool to help you ask harder questions, to evaluate yourself, to learn more about who you are. About 10 years ago, a mentor said this to me, and I have been saying it to some of you over and over. We tend to do for others what we wish they would do for us. Now, let me say that again, because you need to write that down. That's worth the whole morning right here. We tend to do for others what we wish they would do for us. You have to learn to communicate in a way that your spouse understands, it connects with them. You can't just say, well, this is who I am. I got called one night about midnight to an apartment complex with a young couple that I had done their wedding, and they were having a knockdown, drag out. And so I did my pastorally thing and went over there reluctantly a little bit. And I'll never forget it because the wife was sitting there just adamant. She kept telling me, tell him the way he's feeling is stupid. Tell him the way he's feeling is childish. Tell him the way he's feeling. This is so backwards, right? Man, that the wife would be saying this, but she wanted me to tell him that what he was feeling was wrong. And I said to her very gently, his feelings are his feelings. They may be misguided, right? They may have come off of something that maybe he misunderstood you. Maybe you didn't communicate as well as you thought you did. But his feelings are his feelings. You cannot tell somebody that their feelings are wrong, okay? So think about it. Do you do things, do you expect your spouse to do for you these things that you're trying to model, or have you communicated with them what you want, right? Sue and I first got married, one of the biggest hurdles we had was that she'd get really upset. She wanted me to engage her in areas that we would disagree. Well, you know, that last statement she said, is you work on a problem when it's not. Well, when it is a problem, when you're in the heat of the moment, my natural tendency, I was self-aware enough to go, look, if I say what I'm thinking right now, she's leaving me. Like, it's just going to be game over. We're not even a year and a half in. But I didn't communicate that. I didn't know how, for some reason. And so it was one of those first couple of years of marriage things we had to learn. And so finally one day I said it in a way that she went, oh. And after that, it changed everything for us. Then she could give me that 30 minutes, that hour, whatever it needed for me to collect my thoughts and then to say it to her in a healthy way and move on. So please, communication, learn how to communicate to each other. We need to move on because we could almost make that a whole day, I'm telling you. So I want to take you to Matthew 19 for just a second, because Jesus has this conversation with the Pharisees again, and you have to understand the Pharisees, these religious leaders in his day who did not understand the law the way they were supposed to, and they were misinterpreting some things. They come up to him, and it says they wanted to test him in Matthew 19, verse 3. It says, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? I want you to think about that for just a second. In other words, it was very much like today, maybe in a church setting where people are all, well, how far can I go with this? When is it okay? When has my spouse given me enough cause to leave them? Now I want you to watch Jesus' answers as he answered them in verse 4. Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become, underline this, one flesh, so that they're no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. See, the Pharisees are asking this question. They're trying to define all the parameters around this idea of divorce. And Jesus is like, he could have just said, no, it's not lawful for you to divorce. But he tries to help them. He tries to give them some understanding. He says, look, marriage was created for your benefit. By the time we get to Genesis, the creation of Adam and Eve, we should leave Genesis understanding that man and woman were created to be in a power relationship together. They were to rule together. It was not one dominating the other. They were to rule together and each bring the differences that they have to the table so they could lead well together. There's a benefit of this union, and it benefits you. So here's the principle. Give your best to each other. You're supposed to lead together. You're supposed to be a power couple. God wired you so differently. And maybe you think, well, I married somebody I would have never imagined I married, when I was in second grade or whatever. Well, big deal. In second grade, you don't really know who you are anyway. Listen, if you're married to somebody, you're not going to find somebody. You can find somebody who's exactly like you, but chances are they're not going to be good for you. if you're in this relationship and you're finding these differences, celebrate them, right? Give your best to each other. It's not about just, hey, we're going to split up and because we're just too different. This is a hard thing, right? And you are made to rule and lead together. This has been a struggle for us. This is a hard thing. It's easy to get tired. Look, men, we get home from work, or ladies too, because a lot of women have become the primary bread earners in our culture. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, the Bible doesn't say you can't do that, because it doesn't. But here's the deal. Whoever is out like that and coming back in, or even if you're both out working and coming back together, to just say at the end of the day, I'm too tired for this, is a cop-out. We have to understand we're going to be tired. It's going to be dead tired at the end of the day. Those are hard moments. I read a book, and I need to keep moving here, but about 15 years ago, Andy Stanley put out a book. I cannot find my copy. I don't know who has it, but I got on Amazon this week, and the book is like $55, so I'm guessing that it's not in print right now. The book is this. If you can find a copy, get it. It's called Choosing to Cheat. His premise was simply this. You are going to cheat. You're going to either cheat your work life or you're going to cheat your family life. And his principle is cheat your work life. He's not saying don't work hard. He's not saying don't be good at your job. He's not even saying short your boss and don't give him the hours he's paid for. But he's saying, look, when it comes down to it, you got to draw some lines. Don't cheat your family. I grew up in a family where my dad modeled this. I mean, we were having breakfast every morning at 6 or 6:15 together, and of course we had to be on the bus. The kids, we had to be on the bus by 7:15, so we had to get up and get moving pretty early. But he would eat breakfast with the family, leave the house, and then he was home every afternoon by 4 or so. I know that your schedule may not allow for that. I fully understand that, but where do you cheat? Have you thought about it? Are there ways you can adapt your schedule? What are you trying to collect in life? Most of us, men, listen, most of us think about our marriage in this way. I haven't cheated on her. I bring money home to the family. And those are the trophies we give, we collect. We say, this is what we're doing for our family. Wrong. Your trophy is not your 401k. It's not the car, not the house, not the dress. Right? Your trophy should be the life that you build, the relationship that you have with your family, so that one day in heaven, in all eternity, you can stand as a unit, a family unit, and present to God this great thing, that the whole family can be there together. I made this statement in my notes. Let me see if I can find it. You're going to love this. First of all, I married a trophy wife, but I wrote the statement this way. Stop focusing on a trophy wife. Start focusing on a trophy life. Build something that's worth having in all eternity. We have to change the way we think. You want to say a little bit about this?
So part of giving your best is making a commitment. And part of that is just making time for one another. So Cecil's been in ministry for over 30 years, and ministry is a very unique profession. It involves working with people, and we love that. We love what we do. But sometimes that means it's hard to find time to rest and find time to restore. And so we've tried to work really hard at finding ways to do that. So Cecil, Sunday's a full work day for Cecil. I think I know he was up before 5 this morning. I don't know what time he got up, but I know it was before 5. Sunday's a full work day for him. And so he takes one day a week off. Generally, it's Friday. We try very hard to try to protect that day and put our phones away and just to unplug. Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes we do work on Fridays, but as best we can, we try to protect that time and just make that a space where we are able to rest and reconnect. And it looks different every week. Sometimes we go out, sometimes we do things, sometimes we do absolutely nothing. And because we're tired and we just need time to rest. And I think in our culture, we are taught to go, go, go and to not have any downtime. And that's not even biblical. God wants us to rest. We are human and we need time to stop and to refresh. and I know what we do is not possible for everybody. So my encouragement to you is just get creative. Especially, I know for those who have littles, it's very hard to find time. Babysitters are expensive. But I think about one of our elder couples, Bill and Julie Georges. They shared with us, I remember years ago in community group, that when their kids were little and when they were to the age that they could care for themselves, they'd set them up in their rooms. They'd give them, snacks and drinks and activities, movies, whatever, things that ordinarily they weren't allowed to do in their room, and make it a special time for them. And the rule was you have to stay in your room. And then Bill and Julie would pick up takeout or fix dinner and just have dinner at home. Very simple, but just a time for them to intentionally spend time together and reconnect. And just catch up, talk about your day, talk about your week, talk about what's going on in your life. And so for those who have littles, who maybe that's not possible, they're not, to the age where they can take care of themselves just yet, find another couple who's in the same situation as you and take turns watching each other's kids. And again, this can be so simple. It doesn't have to be anything major. The whole point is just reconnecting. It can be, going to get a cup of coffee together for an hour or 2 hours or whatever. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be, a 6-hour evening. But the whole point is just staying connected and spending time together. So my question on this one is, how can you give your spouse your best by making it a priority to connect daily, weekly, and then quarterly as well?
I like how she breaks that down. So we need to move, but I could say a lot more about that. I heard the rumblings of laughter from the parents with littles. As you said, put them in a room and let them do their own thing for a while. We all have those moments, when your kid picked the door lock and they shouldn't have. But just be creative, right? Be creative. Proverbs 22. Here's a verse that rings true to my heart. I wish this for everybody. Proverbs are these short, pithy statements of generalized truth, right? Remember that. That's what the book of Proverbs is all about. It says, the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. This is a generally very true statement. Here's the principle. Structure your finances with each other and do it now. Structure your finances. I know some of you are sitting there thinking, come on, guys, these are like really easy principles. We thought you were going to give us something deep and heavy. Listen, the top 3 stressors that we know about for every marriage are communication, finances, and sex. We're going to push the sex talk off to later. But do you understand that finances are a burden? Debt is a burden. I understand there may be a point in time when you have to carry a certain amount of debt. I understand that most of us don't have the money to pay cash for a house. I get it. Be smart, develop a budget. I always tell couples, look, you need to be brutally honest about what you expect in life. If you expect to drive the Mercedes AMG, then you need to structure your finances to drive the Mercedes AMG. You better be honest. Don't be all noble. Oh, I don't have to have that. And then you do. You've got to be honest with each other. Too many young couples today especially in our culture, they're carrying debt that is choking them. It's a burden. We've got some friends and young couples that, one example is a couple, I did their wedding a few years back, and when they got together, they combined over $70,000 of debt. And that's what they started with. And she wanted to be a school teacher. And right after she got married, decided maybe she didn't want to even do that. She just wanted to kind of be a stay-at-home wife. They were not honest. And by the way, I did not do their premarital counseling, so I'm just saying, because I hit that one. All right? I got another a young couple that we know that I love and celebrate them. I asked, hey, can I share your story? Michael and Allie just last month finished paying off $40,000 of debt in 18 months. They got out of the whatever they were renting. They sold things off. They moved in with her parents. They started just paying it down aggressively and got rid of it. So now they're looking at the future thinking, now we can get in the housing market game or something. But you got to talk about your finances. You cannot put this off. This is killing people. Now, I know my wife has one more piece that You can comment on the finances if you like, but I know you had something else you wanted to say.
As far as the finances, so when we got married, I was teaching and Cecil was going into ministry. So we both realized very early on that we did not choose careers with big paychecks. And so we realized that it was very important that we structure our finances well and very intentionally. Trust me, there were many times we always paid our bills, but it was it was always tight, very, very tight. And so one of the things we did from really day one was we prioritized our offerings, and we said from day one that we would always give a percentage of what we made to the church. And God has been so faithful to provide for us as we do that. Another principle that we used was if we can't pay cash, we don't buy it. Now, that does not apply to our houses and our cars, but everything else, if we couldn't pay cash for it, we didn't buy it. And Cecil and I were very fortunate. Like he said, finances is one of the biggest stressors in a marriage, especially early on in marriage. And we were very, very fortunate in that we both grew up in families that taught us that principle, that if you couldn't pay cash, you don't buy it. And that really just kind of gave us that like-mindedness, which was very, very helpful. So we structured our budget in a way just to not overspend, to not buy something if we couldn't afford it. And we have just always tried to steward well what God has given us, realizing that it's not our money anyway. It is really God's money. And so it's always been our desire to use it in a way that's honoring and pleasing to Him. So my question for you is, are you stewarding what God's given you well? And if not, what needs to change? Again, we have choices in that. God allows us to make choices in how we spend our time and our money. So yes, in closing, I just wanted to say marriage counseling is awesome. About 11 years ago, Cecil and I went through an assessment program. It was very extensive, and one of the components of it was we were required to meet with a counselor. And prior to that time, we had never done that. And oh my gosh, I loved it. Honestly, if we could afford it, we'd go every week. I think counseling is amazing. And so I just want to encourage you guys, if you're struggling, or, even if it doesn't have to be something major, but if there's a tension in your marriage that you're feeling, seek help. So many times people call us. We get a lot of calls from couples who are struggling in marriage, and a lot of times the call, it's too late. And so I just want to encourage you in that. And then also just own your own mess. We are all sinful. We all make mistakes. We all struggle in areas. There are ways we can all improve. And so one of the things I've learned through the years is that when there's tension, when there are problems, it's never 100% one person's problem. I could never say this is 100% your fault. We all have a part in our messes, and so when we're struggling, when there's tension, I need to first and foremost go to God and say, okay, humble myself and say, God, what is my part in this? What do I need to own? What do I need to confess? Because there have been many, many times when I thought it was all His fault, and when I would seek God and ask Him, He would be very faithful to show me lovingly, hey, look at this. You need to deal with this area. And so I hope that encourages you guys, and thank you all for being very gracious today.
Yeah, I want to close with a statement. It's this. Put that quote on the screen for me. It says, you're going to be married several times in your life. The question is, will it be to the same person? I know some of these principles in some capacities sound pretty simplistic, but I'm telling you, most of our issues as couples really is very simple. It's that surrender of that will. So go back to the very first thing we said this morning. When God plays a role in your life, it changes your perspective. It changes what you put your trust in. It changes your worldview, if that's the way you live. But you have to choose that. Once that happens, it allows you to work on things and not be threatened. Right? we understand neither one of us is fully capable of meeting all the expectations of the other. So we lay that down. Okay, I'm going to hurt her feelings, she's going to hurt my feelings, but we are in this to do it differently, to struggle through it together. Think about it that way. I would just offer that to you this morning. Chances are your spouse, you're going to change over the years. So you're going to have many opportunities to re-up your marriage. Maybe it doesn't happen once every 5 years, 10 years. I don't know. Maybe it hasn't happened for you yet. Maybe your spouse hasn't made a big enough transition or transformation, or something just hasn't hit them that caused them to say, ooh, I need to become different in some capacity. But when that happens, the question is not, well, do I want to be with this person? It's no longer about my personal happiness, right? It's about my personal holiness with God. And so you can re-up. So think about it that way. Let me pray for us.